Welcome to News Edge, your sharpest source for daily headlines and deep dives. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and stay ahead of the curve. In the spring of 2025, President Donald Trump's administration sent shockwaves through the North American auto industry by imposing a sweeping 25% tariff on all imported cars and light trucks. The announcement came with little warning, catching automakers, suppliers, and workers off guard. Dubbed the Liberation Day tariffs, the move was pitched as a bold effort to revive American manufacturing and protect domestic jobs. Supporters hailed it as a long-overdue measure to level the playing field against foreign competition, but for many in the industry, the fallout was immediate, chaotic, and deeply unsettling. Executives scrambled to assess the impact while union leaders warned of looming layoffs. Newsrooms buzzed with speculation about the future of the industry, and uncertainty rippled through every level of the supply chain. Automakers like Stellantis, whose production networks span the US, Canada, and Mexico, suddenly faced unsustainable costs. The intricate web of cross-border manufacturing, built over decades, was thrown into disarray. Stock prices for major automakers tumbled as investors braced for a prolonged period of instability. Billions of dollars in market value evaporated in a matter of hours, and analysts warned of a potential recession in the sector. Stellantis responded by temporarily shutting down key assembly plants, a drastic and unprecedented step that sent shockwaves through the industry. Workers were left in limbo, unsure when or if their jobs would return. The seamless cross-border flow of parts and vehicles, once the backbone of North American auto manufacturing, was halted overnight. Thousands of jobs were suddenly at risk, and decades of careful planning unraveled in a matter of days. The first major casualty of the tariff war had arrived, setting off a chain reaction across the continent. The future of the North American auto industry now hung in the balance, with uncertainty looming over every factory and every worker. The first major shutdown sent shockwaves through the North American auto industry, beginning at the Stellantis Windsor assembly plant in Ontario, Canada. This sprawling facility, a cornerstone of Canadian manufacturing for decades, suddenly ground to a halt. Production lines for the Chrysler Pacifica, Voyager, and the highly anticipated electric Dodge Charger Daytona were abruptly stopped, leaving rows of unfinished vehicles on the line and a sense of uncertainty in the air. More than 4,500 workers, many of whom have spent years or even decades at the plant, were left in limbo as the factory went silent. The sudden loss of work rippled through the local community, impacting not just employees but also nearby businesses that rely on the plant's daily operations. Meanwhile, south of the border, the Toluca assembly plant in Mexico, responsible for building the Jeep Compass and preparing for the launch of the new Wagoneer S, also paused operations. This shutdown affected another 2,400 workers, many of whom support extended families and depend on steady paychecks. Both the Windsor and Toluca plants are vital links in Stellantis' supply chain, producing vehicles primarily for the US market. The shutdowns immediately choked off the flow of key models to dealerships, leaving transport trucks idle and lots filled with unsold cars. In a move that underscored the surreal impact of the new tariffs, Stellantis required workers to report to idle factories, where they waited beside silent machinery, uncertain about when or if production would resume. The company's decision was a direct response to the financial blow dealt by the new import tax. Executives scrambled to stem mounting losses, reviewing strategies and financial forecasts as they weighed their next steps in an increasingly volatile market. For thousands of workers and their families, the closures brought immediate anxiety and highlighted the high stakes of the ongoing trade war. The uncertainty stretched far beyond the factory gates, casting a shadow over entire communities and raising urgent questions about the future of North American auto manufacturing. The shutdowns in Canada and Mexico quickly rippled into the US, where Stellantis had to idle several parts-making plants. Nearly 900 American workers across Michigan and Indiana were temporarily laid off as their products suddenly had nowhere to go. Facilities like Warren Stamping and Kokomo Transmission fell silent, exposing the vulnerability of the just-in-time supply chain. Ironically, a policy meant to protect American jobs was now sending US workers home. The layoffs highlighted how deeply interconnected the industry is. No plant operates in isolation. Union contracts offered some short-term protection, but anxiety grew as the shutdowns dragged on. The entire system, built for efficiency, was now paralyzed by a single policy decision. The message was clear: disrupting one link in the chain can bring the whole network to a halt. Stellantis North America's COO, Antonio Filosa, issued a cautious statement, blaming current market dynamics for the company's recent decisions. He emphasized that Stellantis was facing unprecedented challenges, not only from shifting consumer demand, but also from the sudden imposition of tariffs that threatened to disrupt established supply chains. Filosa acknowledged the uncertainty facing both the company and its workforce, and stressed that Stellantis was committed to responsibly assessing the impact of these new tariffs on its operations, employees, and long-term strategy. The company's leadership promised to carefully evaluate every option, hinting at possible adjustments to production schedules and even future investments as they navigated this volatile environment. Meanwhile, the United Auto Workers Union, led by the outspoken Shawn Fain, responded with fierce criticism. Fain accused Stellantis of prioritizing profits over people, and blasted the company for announcing layoffs so soon after the tariffs were introduced. The union argued that Stellantis was using its workers as bargaining chips in a larger trade dispute, rather than standing up for their livelihoods. The UAW had initially supported the tariffs, hoping they would protect American jobs and bring manufacturing back to the U.S. heartland. But now, faced with the harsh reality of layoffs and plant closures, union members were left questioning whether the strategy had backfired, putting their own futures at risk. In Canada, Unifor President Lana Payne echoed these concerns, warning that the tariffs would have ripple effects across the entire North American auto industry. She argued that workers on both sides of the border would suffer, as companies scrambled to adapt to the new economic landscape. The frustration among union members was palpable. Many felt trapped between political decisions made in distant capitals and corporate strategies devised in boardrooms, powerless to influence either. As the layoffs began to take effect, it was the workers, on the assembly lines and in the factories, who bore the brunt of the fallout. Stellantis, for its part, tried to walk a diplomatic line, balancing the demands of government, labor, and shareholders. But the crisis exposed deep and long-standing tensions between management, labor, and government officials, each with their own priorities and pressures. The highly integrated nature of the auto industry meant that disruptions in one country quickly rippled across borders, affecting suppliers, workers, and communities everywhere. The result was a fractured alliance, with trust eroding between groups that once worked together to keep the industry strong. As blame shifted from one side to another, the chaos underscored just how vulnerable the industry and its workers had become in a world shaped by global politics and economic uncertainty. Canada hit back fast, announcing its own 25% tariff on US-built cars and trucks. The move escalated the dispute into a full-blown trade war, threatening American automakers' access to a crucial export market. For companies like Ford, GM, and Stellantis, the new tariffs meant either raising prices for Canadian consumers or absorbing huge losses. Factories in Michigan, Ohio, and Kentucky now faced shrinking export orders and growing uncertainty. The tit-for-tat tariff showed how quickly protectionist policies can backfire, putting jobs at risk on both sides of the border. The North American auto market, once seamless under USMCA, was fragmenting overnight. Canada's response ensured the pain would be shared, not contained. The trade war's economic shockwaves were just beginning. The Stellantis shutdowns revealed just how tightly North America's auto supply chain is woven. A single vehicle might have its engine cast in Mexico, transmission built in Indiana, body panels stamped in Michigan, and final assembly in Ontario. This system, designed for efficiency, depends on open borders and predictable trade rules. Trump's tariffs smashed that logic, making cross-border production financially unworkable. The so-called Canadian minivan was really a North American product. Tariffs ignored this reality. The crisis exposed the system's fragility, efficient in good times but highly vulnerable to political shocks. Trade agreements like NAFTA and USMCA had provided stability. Now, that foundation was gone. The result, a sophisticated network suddenly teetering on the edge. For nearly 7,000 workers in Canada and Mexico and 900 in the US, the shutdowns meant lost income and mounting anxiety. Union contracts offered some relief, but benefits wouldn't last if the dispute dragged on. Families faced tough choices as paychecks shrank and uncertainty grew. The psychological toll was real. Auto jobs support entire communities, and the ripple effects hit local businesses hard. The longer the shutdowns, the greater the risk of permanent layoffs or plant closures. Stellantis might be forced to rethink its North American footprint, threatening future investments and jobs. The human cost of the trade war was measured not just in lost wages, but in the unraveling of economic security for thousands. Workers who built the industry now faced an uncertain future. The production chaos at Stellantis is already hitting U.S. car buyers. With key models like the Pacifica and Compass in short supply, dealership inventories are shrinking and prices are climbing. Scarcity means less bargaining power for consumers and higher sticker prices. The ripple effect could drive up prices for competing models from other brands as well. Canada's retaliatory tariffs could flood the U.S. with unsold American-made cars, but overall market volatility will likely keep prices unpredictable. Ultimately, consumers will bear the cost of tariffs, potentially paying thousands more for the same vehicle. The era of abundant choice and stable prices is under threat. The political goal of protecting industry is translating into a real financial burden for American families. The events of April 2025 exposed the fragility of North America's cross-border manufacturing model. For decades, automakers relied on open trade to build efficient, integrated supply chains. The Stellantis crisis shattered the illusion of frictionless borders, forcing companies to rethink their strategies. Building resilience may mean more local production or bigger inventories, but at the cost of efficiency. The tariffs, meant to protect jobs, instead triggered layoffs and threatened the industry's competitiveness. The lesson: a car is no longer just American, Canadian, or Mexican, it's a North American product. Trade policy must reflect this reality, or risk undermining the entire system. The future of cross-border manufacturing now hangs in the balance, with the next moves shaping the continent's industrial landscape.